So hi everybody, thanks a lot for coming along and welcome to the first community debate as part of our online worldwide seminar in logic and semantics, OWLS, which is organized by myself. And oh my goodness, I should have prepared a list of all the participants, of all the organizers of the OWLS. Myself, Alexandra Silva, Pavel Sobocinski, Nathaniel Fialko, Charles Greloir, S. Krishna, and Coco Maroya. We're all very grateful that you could come to our debate today. So the idea of today's debate is to discuss the structure, to discuss all aspects really of the publishing and community traditions of our field in the light certainly of modern developments like COVID, but also developments that are not quite so modern like climate change, and of course the ongoing development of our discipline as a whole. Our discipline is still young and certainly growing, and its structure, the structure that we have as a community, the way we publish, the way we interact with each other can change over time. And of course it does change, and it has changed over time. So let's make sure that it changes in a way that makes most sense for the overall health of our community. The tagline of this event today is evolution or revolution. And I guess what I mean by that is, as we talk about all the topics today, we should think, do we seek to make small changes to the status quo, or do we need to do something more dramatic, which is perhaps more difficult, but perhaps necessary? So as we talk about all these big questions, we're going to be guided, spotlighted, as it were, on different individual subtopics, by questions which have been contributed by members of the community. If you're one of the people who's contributed a question, I'm extremely grateful for that. That's a really fantastic contribution. Please make sure that you raise your hand. You can find the I can see lots of people are raising their hand already. You can find the raise hand option in the participants menu. Please only raise your hand if you're already one of the people who have introduced a question. Okay, so I'm going to start off by introducing our fantastic panel. So first of all, I'm going to spotlight the video on these people as I introduce them. First of all, Brendan Fong. Brendan's a postdoctoral researcher at MIT. He works on category theory and foundations of computer science. He's experienced with tools and techniques for online conferences. He was one of the main organizers of the ACT 2020 conference this summer. He's also the executive editor of Compositionality, a new open access journal. He's got one foot in the mathematics community, so that's something he can tell us about and bring to the conversation. Our next panelist, Nicole Immorlica, works on game theory and complexity, its application to economics. She's a senior principal researcher at Microsoft Research. After a previous position in academia at Northwestern, she can give us the perspective from industry and maybe also tell us about her new startup initiative, Virtual Chair. Our next, where are you? Our next, so I'm going alphabetical here by surname. Our next panel member is Delia Kesner, who works on logic and type theory. She's a professor at the University of Paris. She served on the steering committee for a wide range of conferences, and she's currently the SC chair of FSCD, which is one of the large international logic conferences. Our next panelist is Benjamin Pierce. He's a professor at the University of Pennsylvania. Hi, Benjamin. He's written powerfully on the need for the computer science community to adapt to the reality of climate change. He works mostly on the theory of programming languages. Thomas Schwentick. Hi, Thomas is a professor at TU Dortmund. He's president of the European Association for Computer Science Logic. At the moment, he's involved in setting up a new open access journal for the whole of theoretical computer science. He works on databases, logic, automata, and related fields. And our final panel member, last certainly not least, is Moshe Vardi, professor at Rice University. He works on automated reasoning, multi-agent systems, many other related areas. He's senior editor of communications of the ACM. He's one of the founders, I think I should say the founder of FLOC, the Federated Logic Conference that brings us all together in Theory B at least, once every 4 years or so. And he's a long-standing commentator on problems with the computer science publishing system. So before we get underway, I'm going to ask the panel members to give us a little opening statement, perhaps tell us a little bit about their perspective, and let's go in reverse alphabetical order. So Moshe, could you fire away? And panel members, please be in control of your own mute buttons so you can unmute yourselves whenever you'd like to talk. Go ahead, Moshe.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Computer science is now about 70 years old, and our publication system has evolved over the 70 years. And it has evolved like any kind of organic system on a sequence of local mutations. Each one is a small change that made sense at the time in response to local conditions. but really, I would say with no overall guidance. Of course, the last change is COVID-19 that forced us to go online. We all know that a system that just moved by gradual changes, it can end up in local optimum, but not global optimum. I think we are right now stuck in a very, very bad place. And it is bad for science and it is bad for scientists. And it's time that we need to rethink, kind of, I would say, let's call it reboot the publication culture or system in computing in a way that will be good for science and for scientists. I mean, there are kind of two different set of requirements that come in, but I just don't believe that continuing this path of each time making a small change is really going to take us to a very significant place. And the place where I'm very frustrated is that it seems incredibly difficult to bring about a significant change. Everybody sees the problem, but somehow we seem to lack the mechanism to bring about significant change.
Moshe, thank you very much. Can we go on to our next panel member, please? Thomas, if we could try and keep these statements as brief as we can, that would be great. Thanks very much, Thomas.
Yeah, thank you. So I also have a kind of historical perspective, so it's more fairy tales. So I think that TCS has lived in a paradise for a couple of decades. And so researchers traveled the world and met a lot of people, publishers did their decent work and got their share for it, but it was still quite affordable and everything looked nice and easy. So maybe I oversimplify a bit. And now we obviously face challenges. And so one of them is that traveling the world doesn't work anymore as easily. It's no longer sustainable. But there are technologies to circumvent it, and COVID has shown us that they can be applied successfully to conferences, at least to some extent. Publishing has moved online, leaving a greater share of the work for the scientists, for the researchers. Publishers still request the same amount of money or even more, and that won't work. So we have to move to kind of publisher independent open access maybe. And I think that has worked quite well for conferences, at least to some extent, but we have to go there for journals. And of course, there are many other problems that can be seen in our publishing world, and in particular fairness issues and many others.
And I'm sure we'll be getting into all of those in due course. Can we move on, please, to Benjamin?
Okay, so my main interest relevant to today is that I got into thinking about virtual conferences through an interest in climate change. A few years ago, several of us in the SIGPlan unit of ACM formed a climate committee. We produced some white papers on climate change and conferences and on carbon offsetting. We wrote an editorial for CACM with some ideas. When the pandemic hit, my collaborator on that committee, Krista Lupsch, said to me, we have an opportunity right now that is not going to happen twice. We've been pushing people to have less conferences. Right now, people are having 0 conferences physically, and that's going to be the case for about a year. And if we make the virtual conferences good, then at least many of them will not switch back. So I spent the first 6 weeks of the lockdown working with Krista and others on an ACM task force that produced a best practices document for virtual conferences. At the end of that experience, what we realized was the support for informal networking, the hallway track, was just not there in the existing platforms. So since then, we've been building our own platform, which is what hackers do. So we have this platform called Clouder. There are several more platforms out there, but Clouder is one of them now. It's been used at PLDI, ICSI, and just recently at ICFP. So my main interest is on what can we do right now to make virtual conferences so good that people will not want to go back.
Thanks very much. Delia.
Yes. When Jamie invited me, I told him that in my case, I have more questions than answers. So my goal is to share some answers with you and some thoughts with you today. I think that there is a real tension in our community between fast and slow research, as in fast and slow food. So I would be interested in understanding if there is a consensus of what is really an innovative research area, topic of problem, what is a good publishable idea of result. If we need to go to a selection system, evaluation system, or maybe both of them, there is this tension between conferences and journals, but I think that they can live together in some sense. We need maybe to think better these models. Do we really want impact factors, and how many papers it is reasonable to publish every year, and so on. And so I think that we need to go to a more balanced system. And the balanced system is not only in terms of conference versus journals or physical conferences versus virtual conference, but of course also in terms of gender balance, and also in terms of integrating a little bit more or more, completely more, developing countries in the international activity of theoretical computer science.
Okay, thank you very much, Delia. Nicole.
Hi, thank you. Yes, so I, in addition to being a principal researcher at Microsoft, am the chair of the SIG Econ Executive, which is a special interest group of ACM. And in that role, I brought our main conference in our community, which my community is EconCF, from the physical format to the virtual format. We ran it on a platform called gather.town. We identified main goals that we thought were important, including hallway conversations, and we constructed a skin over the Gather platform in order to really leverage these goals that we had. It is, I think, incredibly successful. We've since created a company virtual chair that is running conferences in this way for other groups, so you can check that out if you're interested. And my main experience has taught me that I think virtual conferences are a significant part, have significant advantages over physical ones. I'll talk about some of them in the context of the questions, but one thing I want to emphasize here is that this is a quite elite group of panelists, and I assume also an elite group of attendees. I don't think that, I think academia could be much more inclusive and much more broad, which, by the way, your sponsors like Microsoft are very passionate about and very insistent on. And we could really achieve this inclusivity and broad accessibility if we embrace virtual aspects of conferences moving forward.
Nicole, thank you very much. Brendan.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie, for spearheading this, and thanks to all of you for being here for what I believe is a really important discussion. I think great points have been brought up so far. I just want to say, to begin, this session has been framed as a debate, but I think it'd be useful just to set some intention about the tone of the session. In particular, I want to acknowledge that as much as there are sides to this debate, both sides are about promoting values that I think we all share, sort of research excellence, community, inclusivity, environmental ethics. And so, in my mind, the challenge we're faced with here is not to trade off one value against each other in sort of an either or zero-sum way, and not necessarily to even agree or find consensus and closure in this discussion, but simply to listen to one another, to get a feel for how we as a community are thinking in a first step to designing and building community structures that speak to all of these values. So my hope here is that in this discussion and in future discussions that this session will spark, we listen as much as we speak and we remain constructive, creative, and action-oriented.
Sounds good to me. Thanks very much, Brendan, and thanks to the whole panel for introducing yourselves. We would all applaud now, but that's too difficult. So we'll just move straight on to our first question from Sulika Kulkarni, University of Pennsylvania. Sulika, feel free to turn your camera on and your audio on so that we can all hear and see you. And go ahead when you're ready. So okay.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jimmy. The question I had is, how can we reduce the climate impact of physical conferences, and how much should we seek to reduce?
Thank you very much. I would imagine that Benjamin might like to start us on this one.
Yes, I would love to. So I think the first and most obvious question is the fundamental choice of whether we should have physical conferences at all or not. And this is a very difficult question because they are incredibly useful. They are the way that that our community knows itself and mixes ideas. They're the way that junior academics and researchers are brought up, and they're incredibly costly. When I did the calculation of my personal carbon footprint, it was like 2/3 travel to conferences, completely dwarfing everything else. And by the way, the other third was things like heating my house that would be extremely difficult to reduce by a lot. So just in terms of personal ethics, I don't see any alternative but to make my contribution where I can make it, which is traveling less. We just have to do that, and it's completely clear. There are opportunities for reducing the climate impact of physical conferences to the extent that we choose to have them, and I'm not proposing that we get rid of them completely. But they are relatively minor. So we can, but for example, by tweaking the choice of location, we can vary the carbon cost of travel to the conference by around a factor of 2. We did a big analysis on data from SIGPlan conferences, and that was the outcome.
I might argue that you could actually take conferences, you could reduce the impact of physical conferences by doing hybrid things. So you don't need to do only physical or only virtual. You can have some participants participate virtually. You could do this by having a bunch of regional centers where people don't have to get on airplanes as much in order to participate, and have these regional centers coordinated via a virtual platform. And you can have many of the events of the conference be virtual entirely, such that if people wanted to go to a particular event, they didn't have to go to the conference venue itself.
So I would love to respond to that, and then I'll shut up and let other people talk. Hybrid conferences are an excellent idea, and one that should totally be explored, and I'm certain is going to be explored as we move out of the total lockdown situation. But I think my impression from all of the thinking and talking to people that I've done is that the hybrid situation is an order of magnitude harder to get right than either the fully virtual or the fully physical. That the danger is you just wind up with the virtual conference and the physical conference, or the physical conferences happening in parallel but not really interacting, and just sapping organizational effort to try to put on at the same time. So how we're going to get through that difficulty is going to be a very interesting process that I don't see my way through. But we are certainly going to be doing experiments.
Can I make a quick comment, Jamie?
Absolutely.
So, but we must recognize, I agree with everything that's been said here, but we must recognize that computer science is an anomaly, that pretty much every paper involves going to a conference. No other discipline does this kind of a conflating that a paper has to appear in a conference. So we must, in my opinion, first of all, unbundle these two different things. We publishing a paper from the functionality of a conference, and then we can have a discussion how to do these conferences. Other disciplines manage to do great science with much smaller number of conferences, very different format of conferences. We've created something very unique. And I said, the only way to explain it is evolution over 70 years. And it makes absolutely no sense. And again, except that I don't know how to get out of this particular equilibrium.
Delia, how can we reduce the carbon footprint of physical conferences? Or indeed, should we? Delia, we can't hear you if you're speaking.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Sorry. So it's a very difficult question. What I try to do is to list the advantages of physical conferences and virtual conferences. And in my ideal world, I would like to mix these advantages in maybe a hybrid model, as it was said already. So I would like to have the opportunity to continue to have work meetings, discussions, exchange, and networking during the conferences, to have a social interaction, full scientific immersion. I think that physical conferences are also interesting. Well, it's not the main goal, but they are also interesting to experiment geographical, cultural, and professional discoveries. And professional discoveries in the sense it is usually very useful to understand in which framework our colleagues evolve and work, especially with respect to developing countries. Of course, I like from virtual conferences the fact that there is low cost or no cost at all, and so this makes them very inclusive, even if there are some people saying that this pushes the not engaged participants. I think that this is not the major problem of virtual conferences. I like a model in which we promote diversity of attendance. And also, well, we all know that it's more compatible with family duties, teaching, administrative duties, and all that. So I think that I may be less radical than Benjamin, but I think that the model needs to evolve to a more balanced model, ideally a hybrid model, and the hybrid model is to be constructive. I mean, we don't know very well what is a good hybrid model. But there are many options to mix physical and online attendance, and I would like different conferences to experiment different kind of hybrid models in the future in order to be able to compare them, to evaluate their performance, and to understand which is maybe the best model for us. Okay. But I think just to finish that I think that there is a danger of a scientific life which is fully spent in front of a computer, and I don't want a scientific life like that.
So Thomas and Brendan, the question was, how can we reduce the climate impact of physical conferences? The main answer from some of the panelists so far has been to have hybrid events. I thought people would be talking about vegetarian food, right? But maybe this is just too small beer.
Yeah.
Also, Brendan, do you want to contribute?
Yeah, so I'd like to step back a little bit. So maybe now it's time where I'm allowed to do this. So we have this TCS4F initiative, and so our idea is that each conference for its own decides first for a goal. So we say, okay, would you commit yourself to a 50% reduction by 2030? I mean, of course, that's a political number. You can go to 90% or whatever you want. And once you committed to this goal, then you can discuss about the exact means. So in my experience, discussions about reduction of the carbon footprint start promising, but then at some point you end at the point where you say, and physical conferences are nicer in the end, so let's not change it eventually. But I think if you have committed to a goal, then you have to think about how to reduce it. So maybe you want to travel, but then you have to reduce something else. Maybe you go biannual, physically and online. So there are many options. But
okay, thank you, Brendan.
Yeah, 2 quick points. First, I think there are many advantages to having fewer physical conferences, environmental concerns aside. I think many, like inclusivity and the sort of personal impact to travel have been brought up. So I think that's something good to consider. But second, the question asked not only how can we reduce it, but how much should we reduce it? Yeah. Or how much should we seek to reduce the impact? And Thomas sort of made a good point about goals, and I think this is really important. Instead of just arguing over the merits of physical conferences versus virtual conferences, we can first decide some sort of target balance, even if it's only short-term, even if it's only political. And then, for example, why not hold LICs remote every second year? This would cut the impact of that community in half.
Okay. Thanks everybody for your comments, and we'll come back to all of these topics that we've touched on. We'll be continually coming back to them throughout the debate, but we're going to move on now to the second question, which is from Julia Lawal at the University of Paris. So I will unmute you, Julia, and you then go ahead when you've unmuted yourself. We should be able to hear you now.
Okay, thank you. So before I ask my question, I want to make 2 points. One of them is I'm not really part of the theoretical computer science community. I'm more part of sort of programming languages, software engineering, and systems. And these are the communities
that's fine for us.
In which I've participated in virtual conferences over the last 6 months. So that's what my experience is. And the second point I want to make is my question is about specifically about the talk part of the conference when people are making presentations and not about the hallway track part of the conference. So the question is, even though organizers are clearly trying very hard, virtual conferences are, in my opinion, and I think in the opinion of a number of people I've talked to, so far a fairly miserable and disappointing experience. In many areas, talks are very short. I've seen conferences with talks of 3 minutes, talks of 6 minutes. And the audience can't get any grasp of a topic that's just even a little tiny bit outside the mainstream of the conference. Students are very, very disappointed by, they work on a project for 3 years perhaps. This is the pinnacle of their PhD. And actually in the 3 minutes they have to present it, or 5 minutes they have to present it, no one understands the topic well enough to be able to ask any meaningful questions. The co-authors who have also invested a lot in the project are just completely invisible. You only see the person in the little box on the video typically. And then from the attendee point of view, it's very stressful. You're in your own normal work environment with the normal, or maybe in your own home. In both cases, those environments make other demands on you. You're looking at the thing on a little screen all day. It's very hard to focus on it. You can easily get distracted. If the talks are very short, you get distracted for 1 minute and the whole talk is gone. And at this point, I've talked to a number of people who just want to give up on things like IFIP working groups, which are maybe more discussion oriented, often kind of the highlight of the year for many people, but the people just can't stand seeing another Zoom meeting anymore. And people say, I can't focus on more than 1 talk per day.
Okay. So this is a really fantastic question. Nicole,
how can
you agree that for some people, virtual conferences can be a miserable experience?
Yeah, so let me tell you how we handled this in the conference that I organized. We had a month before the conference, every day pre-recording sessions. So a pre-recording session consisted of having the authors, we would have 3 authors show up, and our talks in our field in physical venues are typically 20-minute talks. So we had them speak for 20 minutes. And this was on Zoom, it was recording, and this pre-recording session served 2 purposes. One was to allow our community to consume the content of the conference at a relaxed pace. This took place over several weeks, and also it took place around the clock, so it helped manage the time zone issue. And so a lot of people would attend these and get the content of the talk before the conference. We then processed the talks and posted them online so people could consume the talks on their own before the conference if they wanted. We encouraged and facilitated this self-consumption using a mentoring workshop where we assigned mentor-mentees to discuss particular papers in the conference. And then in the conference itself, we had what we called watch parties, where you could watch these talks together with your peers simultaneously at pre-scheduled times, and then participate in Q&A at a poster session. So I, by and large, think that the students that participate in this conference felt like this was an amazing experience and a pinnacle of their career. They really got a lot of feedback, and our survey of our participants after the conference suggested that there was quite a lot of interaction around the content of the talk. Now, having said that, perhaps our conference is you know, we consider ourselves incredibly interdisciplinary, but maybe 20-minute talks, it's easier to grasp what's going on in Econ CS than like category theory. At least it is for me.
Come to some category theory conferences.
Sorry?
You should come to some more category theory conferences.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Brendan's also organized a big online conference this summer. Brendan, do you think some of your participants had a miserable experience? Do you think everybody who gave a talk felt that they were able to communicate scientifically the idea as easily as they would at a real event?
I certainly think that there are mixed experiences, and this showed up in our surveys too. And I think many people really benefited from the online event, particularly in terms of broadening participation and getting people involved that wouldn't have been able to attend a physical event. But for some of us too, it was not the same as being in the same room as people. It was not the same as the Applied Category Theory Conference last year. And I really do feel that. And I think Nicole's spoken to a bunch of techniques that I think will emerge and become perfected over a period of time that will help address this. Yeah, a virtual conference is not the same thing as a physical conference, and it will, I think we all have to accept that it will fall short on some measures. But I think that's still worth pursuing at least a significant fraction of the time.
Would another of our panelists like to come in? Are there any advantages of virtual? Let's turn this on its head. Moshe, please go ahead.
Yeah, so we switched to virtual conferences at the drop of a hat in March. So of course we did the natural thing to do, which is we try to take the standard structure of a conference and just virtualize it. But if you think about it, a conference used to be a physical conference. It was first of all limited in space because it took in a particular place, and this place was far away from most people. And therefore, people to allocate a certain time slot. I'm going to be at FSCD for this particular time slot. So we created events that are localized in space and in time. And the time followed from the space constraint. But we all realize now that sitting and looking at a Zoom session for a full day is just impossible. It doesn't work. I'm actually a pretty good listener, and I can sit in a normal conference a whole day, 6 hours, and listen to talks. It's impossible to do it online. So I think there are lots of ideas. I think people are going to experiment, but I think we will probably give up on the idea that the conference must be like a time-limited experience. We do a conference for 3 days. Why does it have to be 3 days? If we flatten it, for example, and we say it's a 1 talk per day, what happens if we have a month-long event? I mean, in fact, we have such events. We call them seminars. What happens if we just completely change the structure of this? So there's a lot of good ideas here, but I think we have to recognize that the heritage of a conference came from a physically, a location-constrained event. And once you give it up, it opens many possibilities.
So it sounds, Moshe, like you're talking about revolution rather than evolution. Delia, Thomas, I see you raising your hand. Do you think we need to make a dramatic change? Do you think small changes maybe not enough?
Well, I think there will be an evolution, and I think the visual presentation of a paper will just be decoupled from conferences. So, I mean, it just as Moshe said, it's at conferences because it was there where people met. But if it's all online, then the video can just be online, and there is no need to meet at a certain time to watch the visual presentation of a paper. And there can be appetizer videos, and there can be more in-depth videos, and that can be combined. And then the essence of a conference would be to talk about the paper, the video, whatever. But there's no need to have online talks at conferences. So that's
Nicole, I think you wanted to come in there briefly.
Yeah, so I think that, you know, we did have this, like, as I mentioned, several weeks of presenting all the papers in the conferences at a relaxed pace. But we still felt it was essential to have a focused event because there's a coordination problem you have to solve. You want a lot of people to show up all at once. And so that focused event doesn't necessarily need to have full-length talks, and we can discuss that. But I think that we still need to have like 3 days that we dedicate to networking with our community.
Delia, please go ahead. I can see you want to.
Yes, I wanted to add that there is also the possibility to publish a paper in a journal, and then when you submit your final version, you submit the LaTeX sources and also a video presentation. So that can be a way to make the system evolve. But I think that this is true that this summer during the virtual conferences, there was a big attendance, but small time spent at the conference, because usually people only spend time for some chosen talks. But I think that in some sense, the experience was bad because the social experience was very bad. I think that we are not still ready to have a good social interaction in a virtual way. So as far as I know, there is this Zoom system that you Jamie, you are using in this seminar, for example, to split the community in small groups and to promote discussion in this way. But this is not still what we like to do during coffee breaks in conferences. So I have recently had the experience of this Gather system, in which maybe you know already this system in which coffee breaks are done in a big room, and you have an avatar, and you can move your avatar and approach people to talk, but you choose to whom you want to talk. And well, innovative tools like that can help us to improve the model of virtual and hybrid conferences. But I think that I'm more that evolution and not revolution, because there are a lot of ways to explore and a lot of ideas to explore, and we don't need to fix a model, a virtual model in which the virtual conference is just a copy of the previous physical conference.
So we'll on our
I would
next
like to jump in too. May I jump in on that question?
Go ahead, Ben. I was just going to say that our next question is going to be more focused on the professional networking side. So it'd be good if we could focus a little bit.
I will address both.
Go ahead, Ben.
I will address both. So I think we are actually in the middle of a revolution. It's not a choice to make, it's a fact. At least for the next year or maybe more, we are doing things in completely radically different ways, and there's a tremendous amount of experimentation going on. So there was a period at the beginning where people were just scrambling, but now people have time to prepare. Conference organizers have time to prepare, and there is a huge amount of creativity going into organizational structures and social structures and technological platforms that is going to come out with, is already coming out with fruits, and those are going to get better and more cross-fertilized over the coming months. I would like to inject a few numbers into the conversation, if I may. I've just been looking at the post-conference survey results for ICFP, which was last week. And I hope people can see this.
So the chat is not public. Are you using the chat? The chat is not publicly.
No, I'm not using the chat. I'm trying to screen share. There we go. Can people see?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, so here's a kind of high-level question. Do you agree or disagree with the statement, based on my experience of virtual ICFP 2020, I would attend a future virtual ICFP? And you see that overwhelmingly, the response is strongly agree. There are some that are a little less sure, so we're not quite there yet, but overall, I take that as success. Here is maybe a more revealing one. So this is a question about the hallway track specifically, the social interactions, informal social interactions. Were they worse, better, about the same? And you see that the modal answer is worse, but not much worse. So I take this as a gigantic success, because of course the social interactions at a virtual conference are worse. So I totally expected that, and what I was fearing was that the huge weight in the graph would be on the very top line, the much worse. It is not. And as I said, we're in the middle of a lot of experiments. There's much further to go with making it less worse. We may not ever get to parity with physical conferences, but I think there's much more we can do. In particular, so there's is it better or worse for the people that would have been there anyway? But then what about the rest of the people? So this graph says, would you have been there if the conference had been virtual? It had been physical, excuse me. And you can see that about half the people said, yes, I would have been there if it had been physical. And about half the people said no. And then there's a breakdown of exactly why it was no. The biggest ones are financial, time required, carbon concerns. But the bottom line is we got twice as many people, according to this estimate, as we would have. That's huge. So I think there are many reasons to think that that actually we're doing fine with virtual conferences, and we should just keep going with the revolution that we're in the middle of.
So Julia, what do you think of the responses that you've heard? You're still there, Julia, in the panel.
Yes, so I'm still here. So on the one hand, I see some advantages to what Nicole presented, but on the other hand, I think we have to remember that people have a finite amount of time. Most of the conferences, most of the research conferences I've attended have had this model with the videos, like this poor speaker has to make a long video and a short video, despite having no particular previous video production experience. But as an attendee, I wasn't motivated in the weeks before when I was writing other papers or doing other things to spend time watching the videos. And I don't think many people were, because at the conference, people were not asking questions in this on the talks where the topic, again, as I was saying, was a little bit off topic, where people weren't getting it somehow. So I'm not sure that people really have a month to spend on each conference.
Does anyone want to come back? We should
I would like to
go on
say
to the next
one other
question
thing,
very
though,
quickly.
is that what comes closest to the best conference I've been to was an industrial conference that I attended last week. And this conference, in the normal world, it has talks from 15 minutes to 45 minutes, and they did exactly the same thing. All the talks were completely live, no videos were presented in advance. One thing that was people really appreciated was there was a chat inside, right next to the video. And so people could ask their questions in the chat. People seemed very, very hesitant to turn on their cameras, even though the organizers keep telling them to turn on their cameras to ask their questions, but people liked typing things. So I know a lot of conferences, I don't know, for security reasons, turn off the global chat. Maybe turning it on could make people feel a bit more involved.
We do that here in OWLS for reasons of spam, basically, because we can't easily control access. Access is difficult for virtual events. You can throw people out of a physical conference, more or less, as hard as throwing people out of a virtual event. Okay, thank you very much, Julie, for your contribution. Really fantastic. So we're going to, again, keep coming back to these topics, I'm sure, but we'll move on to our next question. So the next question is about professional networking experience at virtual conferences. This was by far the most popular topic amongst the questioners, and I want to hear from 3 different people very briefly, if we can, who raised this. So first of all, Faith Ellen from the University of Toronto. If you unmute yourself, Faith, you can go ahead. Yeah, we should be able to hear you now.
Okay, so one of the important functions of a conference is providing opportunities for members of a research community to interact socially with one another to foster a sense of community. And this is particularly important for new and younger members of the community. Senior meetings where 3 or 4 junior participants sign up to talk to a senior volunteer that kind of setup has been used at Stock and Podsy, and they're helpful to a limited degree, but are more like mentoring sessions than social interaction. So I want to know, are there mechanisms that can address can provide opportunities for social interaction if physical conferences disappear?
So I guess you have in mind serendipitous interaction rather than stage-managed mentoring sessions and things like that.
That's
okay,
right.
Thank you.
Exactly.
So Ugo Delago, you could go ahead briefly if you don't mind. You'll need to unmute yourself, I suspect. Ugo Delago from the University of Bologna.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so my question is very similar to the one by Faith. So I'm wondering whether these kind of casual encounters. We added conferences which are especially crucial for young researchers, in which kind of an alchemy between members of a neighboring scientific community happens, and sometimes they lead to nothing, but sometimes they lead to some crucial advance for the younger researchers. How can we replicate or facilitate this mechanism within an online conference? So
Ugo, have you personally had a particularly good or bad experience with regards to professional networking this summer? I'm sure you participated.
Yes, this summer I participated to ICALP and Leaks, and I was kind of lacking this opportunity. It was a fantastic conference. I enjoyed it very much from the scientific side, but from the point of view of social interaction, there were some social events. I participated to them. That the granularity of the social event was about like 10 people, 15 people, 20 people. I'm thinking about like these encounters made of 2, 3, 4 people, right? Typically mediated, two people who meet for the first time, mediated by a common friend, a common acquaintance.
Okay, thank you very much. And the third person who raised this was Ashwani Anand from Chennai Mathematical Institute. Thank you very much, Ashwani, for raising the question. Do you want to give your perspective very briefly, if you can?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. So I am a master's student at CMI. So I feel that, so my question is also same as the previous two. And I personally feel that online conferences will not be able to provide us newcomers the same networking opportunities as a physical conference would. So my question is again the same. Is it actually possible to have these hybrid or online conferences which can provide us, the newcomers, the same opportunities?
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm particularly pleased that you submitted this question, and I'm happy to ask it as a master's student. I would have been absolutely terrified to participate in an event like this as a master's student. I still am, to be honest. Okay, well, let's go ahead with Brendan first. I know you put a lot of work, Brendan, in the Applied Category Theory 2020 event you organized this summer in putting in place lots of mechanisms for social interaction. I think you found some of them work well, some less well. Maybe you could talk about that briefly.
Mm-hmm. So I have sort of four different ways we tried to experiment with this. One is a Zulip channel, so this is similar to Slack, which is maybe more well known, but Zulip is sort of more free and open. So there's a category theory community Zulip channel, and it has wide participation from both junior members of the community and senior members of the community. And so this was an organizing hub for just asynchronous discussion during especially the ACT conference week, but has continued, was established before and has continued since. As far as I can tell, this is a great avenue for professional networking. It seems that many people have started projects over it and so on. Three other platforms that we experimented with were video-based. One is Zoom breakouts. There was a Zoom breakout before this discussion, and there'll be one after. These seem reasonable, adjacent to talks, but not perfect. Another thing we tried to do was to organize sort of permanent video rooms on topics. So we had a topic on, I don't know, systems and category theory, or a topic on a room on categorical quantum mechanics. And so people could join these rooms whenever they felt like having.
What worked and what worked well, what worked less well in your experience?
Right. So perhaps the most promising is Gather, and maybe it would be best if Nicole spoke about this and gave a bit of a demo. But I want to just make a point, address something Ashwani just said, which is that physical conference networking for new people is, physical conferences are good for new people, but a certain type of new person as well. Jamie said that he would be terrified to ask a question like this in a conference or in this sort of thing as a master student, and I would have been too. And so something like, say, Zulip or Slack works much better for me personally in establishing this sort of relationship. And there are also programs that we've designed to try and help bring new members into the community, like the Applied Category Theory School, which involves sort of pairing students with a mentor and a reading program in the lead up to a conference, whether it be virtual or physical, so that they have some introduction to the community and contact with senior members. So there are things to be done there, but I'll hang back.
Okay, shall we move on to Nicole? But Brendan, there's actually quite a bad echo on your line. I don't know if you could maybe move back a little bit from your laptop. I don't know. Anyway,
okay, thanks, Jamie.
Nicole, if you did want to do a demo, if you could do it very quickly, that would be fantastic. Wow, here it is.
So this is the Gather space that this is created by my company, Virtual Chair, but it's very similar to what we used for EC.
Sorry, Town is not your company, right?
No, Gather Town is not our company. Virtual Chair is our company, and Gather Town just provides the hookups, so it provides an interface by which you can build spaces like this, and our company builds these spaces and runs conferences on them, so that you don't have to. As you can see, there's things like tables here. So if I sit at a table, the only other people who can talk to me are people at this table. And so at EC, which was the conference I ran, I hung out at a table and a ton of different junior people came by and talked to me and had career advice type conversations. Another thing that we do, I think this does well in terms of producing interaction, are these posters. So every talk had an associated poster, and you could walk up to the poster and talk to people that were at the poster. The job market candidates posters were marked as job market candidates, and so you walk up to the poster, you can view it and talk to the poster presenter about the poster or about anything else, but it facilitated networking. And then of course these tables can easily be used for junior senior type lunches and things like that, which we also did at EC. So that's the Gather platform, and it's also nice because you just will randomly run into people, so it facilitates spontaneous interaction. Like, I don't know this person, but they're in our space, so I can go walk, I can locate a path to this person, and then when I get close to them, her video appears up there. And so that is the Gather platform. The interaction that this facilitated, I think, was quite successful. So here you can see that many people, there's like 140 respondents to this survey, many people had long, 5 to 20 minute conversations. A substantial fraction had longer conversations that were unstructured. So that didn't include like junior senior lunches or conversations at posters. Then in terms of what the conversations were about, they tended to be about research or career paths and stuff like that. And in terms of new interactions, like 68 people met out of 140 met someone they hadn't ever met before in this platform. So I think this platform did a really great job for facilitating interaction, and it's very promising when it's well set up. I don't know if I could take questions about the platform or about how it operates.
It's a bit hard to take specific questions, but maybe we could go to another panel members. Delia or Benjamin, Thomas or Moshe, what do you feel about the question of—
I would love to jump in.
Virtual conferences? Yes, please.
Okay.
Nicole, do you mind stopping your screen share?
Yeah, I'm trying to do that now.
But go ahead, Benjamin.
I would like to highlight a few different things that that we did at ICFP and that seemed to work well. So one was integrating text chats with other things that were going on. So for each paper we had a text chat that persisted throughout the conference and that was automatically visible when the paper was being viewed. We had larger group text chats, public text chats, and direct messages. And these were very heavily used for ad hoc quick communications by text. We also had ad hoc video spaces, and so we allowed participants to create their own topic-based rooms. There was a room for student volunteers that got created. There was a room for graduates from some particular university. So people created all sorts of different topic-based rooms and then hung out in them. We also had just rooms labeled coffee chat that people could go to. And I thought this was quite successful. Another thing that we tried, and there were pluses and minuses, but I think on the whole it was appreciated, was we made the Q&A sessions long. So rather than having, you know, a 15-minute talk and then 2 minutes of questions, we had a 15-minute talk, and then if you wanted to, you could ask questions by text during the talk, but if you wanted a video chat with the authors, you went to a different space that was scheduled for half an hour, and people made very heavy use of that and seemed to like it a lot. We have a lot of other ideas for things that future conferences could do that we didn't get around to implementing, but I think the basic message is that as with the Gather platform, the need for social interaction has to be the first design consideration, both for the platform and for the organization of the conference overall. And if you take it with that kind of seriousness, there are a million things you can do, and a lot of them will work well.
Thank you very much, Benjamin. Delia, maybe we could come to you. Do you feel, I think you've already said that you felt that the social networking aspect of FSCD this year was not as great as we would hope from a regular FSCD. What do you think about that in the future? Could FSCD even, is this something that could hold back FSCD from being a regular virtual event in the future?
Yeah, so for FSCD this year, we try to reproduce physical conferences in the sense that the talks were live talks, and with a session of questions. The invited talks were live also, but of course we didn't have a very good social interaction experience this year. So I agree with what Benjamin said. We need to experiment new tools. I like a lot this gather system that was shown by Nicole. I like also this idea to force us to try to understand what is exactly the features that people like in this social interaction virtual world. But I'm a little bit scared also about the future, in the sense that I'm very sensible, of course, to climate change and carbon footprint, but I'm also very scared about a full life in front of my computer. So I believe that that's why I'm talking more about an evolution and not a revolution, because I think that we should try to go to a hybrid system in which we can balance a little bit things, but in which we can still have also a real physical interaction, not only virtual interaction.
So Delia, I think I can certainly understand, I'm sure many people here can certainly understand the feeling of not wanting to have the rest of our careers in front of our computer. But what specifically do you fear we will miss out on? Will it be that the scientific communication is poorer? Will it be that the social interaction is poorer? Or is it just that, you know, you want to visit another city occasionally and actually see some of your friends, and maybe you miss having a beer with them in the evening? And of course, we know that collaborations can come out of these informal settings just as much as the questions after a talk. So what is it specifically that you worry?
I think that what is important is the opportunity to approach someone in a very spontaneous way. Of course, you can do it also virtually, but maybe you can do it, you will do it and you will start a conversation, but then there is no beer besides behind that. There is no maybe a more deep conversation that allows you to start a collaboration. So in my experience, I start a lot of collaborations by talking with my colleagues during conferences. So maybe it's not experience of everyone here, but this is the important point for me. It's not, of course, there are some points that we will lose, like visit tourism and all that, but this is not the point. This is, I think we all agree that if we want really to low carbon footprint, we need to care about these things. But I'm talking about starting collaboration and starting real scientific discussions during conferences.
Okay. Thomas or Moshe, what's your view on the question of professional networking? By the way, Nicole has said she might need to leave after an hour. I heartily encourage you to blow off your next meeting as day anyway, but anyway, we're extremely grateful for your contribution so far. And of course, if you need to leave, you should feel free to do that. But Thomas or Moshe,
I'll listen to the rest of this question and then I need to drop off.
Okay. Thomas or Moshe, do you want to come in on this question about professional networking of virtual conferences?
Yeah.
Moshe, go first, please.
Yeah, I think we are a bit trapped that we are talking about conferences that are regular events that have been taking place for a long time. And now we think, okay, how do we move leaks online? How do we move CAV online? Well, how do we do that? But let's imagine we're starting something new. We're starting a conference, let's say, on a completely new topic, conference on virtual conferences. It doesn't exist. It's a new topic. And actually, it's a as we just heard, it's an interesting research topic, okay? It's not exactly category theory, but there are interesting issues of HCI and psychology and sociology.
I'm sure category theory can be applied, Moshe. I'm sure category.
Yeah. And so now the question is, I like what Benjamin said. Let's design it let's do a de novo. We're not trapped in what we had to do before. It doesn't have to be tied to, I have to have my annual paper at leaks. We have an opportunity to experiment now, and the cost is lower, and let's 1,000 flower bloom. I mean, let's try all kind of different things. And what Benjamin said resonates with me. A conference should be first and foremost about the social interaction, because you can think, the papers are available, you can put videos there. I mean, a lot of the information exchange can happen without doing this. So let's design a conference on social interaction, scientific social interaction, first and foremost. And because it's a new topic, we don't have to be tied to the pattern of the past. We can do lots of new experiments, and that's what we need to do right now.
Maybe we should have got a sociologist on the panel as well. Thomas.
Absolutely. A lot of these really, we are all now amateur sociologists, and we're thinking, what does it take to people to build career in science? And it requires that young people get recognized. Yeah, we're doing a bit, it would be good to have some people who actually study. It's a topic of study, the sociology of science. And we think, as I said before, we need to promote both science and scientists at the same time.
Thank you, Moshe. Thomas.
Yeah, as much as I like to meet colleagues, I think the most pressing part of this problem is really for young people. I mean, who are not connected yet. And that has two aspects. So one is connecting to senior people and one is connecting to peers. So for senior people, maybe conferences and what Nicole and Benjamin showed us could work well. I think for meeting peers, the community has to offer more events like summer schools. So I think in short term, so with COVID, we could try that also online. So I think if a group of 30 people meets for a week, then you can organize it so that people talk to each other and get to know each other at least a little bit. And midterm, when it comes to the carbon question and COVID is gone, then still a lot of the carbon should go into events like this for young people who can meet other young people, or also some seniors, of course. Summer schools also involve seniors.
Okay, we don't have time to come back to all the questions, but Ashwani Anand at Chennai, I'd really like to come back to you and get your thoughts on what the panelists have said, if you're still there.
Hello. So I actually liked the idea of gather and other suggestions that they had. But then again, the issue I think is the small casual conversations that we have usually during conferences. I think that will be a bit restricted, but I guess we can actually live with it maybe. But yeah, we can try new things, experiment and then see. But for now, the ideas like gather and those actually seem to work.
Okay, thank you very much. And thanks to the panel for asking that question. Okay, so on to our next question, which is from Nikolai Kraus at the University of Nottingham. Go ahead, please, Nikolai.
Hi, everyone. So this goes back to something that Moshe said earlier. Most of our papers are currently published at conferences, while in other subjects, people publish in journals, and conferences can be reserved for for other informal meetings. What do you think would we lose or gain if we moved computer science more to journals as well?
Okay, so moving computer science from a conference-first model, I'm sure everybody here is aware what the tradition, maybe there are people who from other communities, right? The tradition in our community is that many people here, we have an idea, we publish it in a conference, hopefully a high-profile one. It takes a long time because maybe the conference only happens once a year. And then after that, we maybe submit an updated, expanded version of the work in a journal. You know, we've had to write 2 papers on the same topic. In other fields like mathematics, they think all this is a bit silly. Who could we go to first on this? Moshe, perhaps.
So right now, my experience with conference paper, and it's actually worse not for me, but for my students, is absolutely terrible. And the reason is because it used to be understood that conference publication is a preliminary one. In fact, you can look at some of my early paper, it will say preliminary draft on the title even. And people really expected to see in the paper interesting ideas. So it will be, you know, an intriguing paper. Now, as conferences become the standard, people expect perfection. Now, the answer is the first draft. Nobody produced a first draft that is perfect. I mean, I can tell you, having, you know, spent a decade being editor-in-chief of one of the most prestigious publications of the ACM, no paper is accepted on the first draft. Many papers take 1 or 2 revisions. And in a good journal, you look for the good idea. If you have good ideas, you think of the editorial process as one which is not adversarial, but it's meant to help the author produce a better paper. Instead, we have created now the mentality is, let's find a flaw so we can reject the paper. So you get the reviews and you say, okay, fair points, let's resubmit it to the next conference. There will be another set of people that will find some flaws in your paper. And so now my students are saying, okay, who can have the longest sequence of rejection before the paper is accepted? You know? And the main element, the only way to reach perfection is iterated improvement. And if we do that, I don't care whether we call it conference or journal, let's separate the 2 things. But the essential element of how to reach what we call archival quality is the same group of people working with you in a constructive way. I mean, some papers are not good enough and you decline them, okay? But if you think there is a good idea there, the reviewer job is to help you produce a better paper. And we have missed this constructive idea of reviewing and instead turn it into a blood sport.
So Moshe, it sounds like you would broadly support Nikolai's proposal. Broadly, the details, of course, are there to be discussed.
You know, there are people now talking about what they call kernels and references. But again, maybe by the time everything moves online and virtualized, this will be, you know, the distinction will kind of go away. What I'm saying is we need to recognize what is the essential element of how you get good scientific paper. Is one, recognize good ideas, and many papers don't have good ideas or the execution is too flawed. But if the good idea is there, then you want a constructive editorial process to help you reach archival quality. And that's what we seem to have forgotten that.
So Thomas, I know that you're in the process of setting up a new journal, for the open access journal for the whole of theoretical computer science. I wonder if this is an issue that you've thought about.
Yeah, I mean, a little correction. I mean, we are quite a group of people who are doing this. No, it's not I'm starting a new journal, but yeah, but thank you. Yeah, I mean, our plan is to start a new high quality open.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about that if you like.
Yeah, so yes, we're in the process of starting a new high quality open access journal that tries to be broad for TCS. I hope we can start this next year. And if you're interested in this, please contact me. We think that journal publications are important, but of course, part of the journal publication is that the proofs are checked. I mean, for our field, proofs are very important and proofs have to be checked in the end. And that takes a lot of time usually. Yeah, and I think that's, of course, the main reason why conferences first is our system, because you can first judge a paper on its relevance and assume that it's correct. And I mean, you have a look and you check it, but you can't check it incompleteness, and then you first talk about the relevant ideas. But for a journal reviewing, well, it takes a year or can take longer, and I don't see how this can be really improved. But since we are now talking about more general aspects, I would like to advertise a webpage from one of the participants here in the audience, from Antoine Amarilli, because he has collected very many aspects of our publishing system, very many bugs, and he also has quite a ton of solutions. So so this is where it stands. Antoine Amarilli, What's Wrong with Academia? If you're interested in these questions, please have a look there. I mean, I don't agree with everything he writes, of course, but there are so many interesting aspects that you could look at.
Okay, thank you very much. Benjamin, Brendan, or Delia, would you want to come in on this question?
Yes, I agree. I mean, but I think that it's interesting also to have, of course, we need, the papers need some iterations in order to be perfect or almost perfect. But I think it's also interesting to have some kind of publication in which papers are just ideas. I mean, not necessary perfectly proven theorems, but maybe something more informal. This corresponds maybe to the idea of workshops in which it is possible to present ideas which are not mature enough. I like also this kind of system. So again, I think that we need a balanced model in which we have workshops to present interesting but maybe immature ideas. Conferences in which, for example, submission and notification deadlines are established in advance, so you know how to organize maybe your academic life during the year. There is a quick dissemination of ideas by means of these conferences. But if you want maybe to publish a more longer technical contribution, then of course it's more logical to go to a journal. And I'm happy to know that there is a new journal well, that will happen soon, because I think that if we want to balance the system, at least in theoretical computer science, we need more journals that are open access, free in the sense of gratuity and electronic. So, well, I'm not sure that we will be able to speed the evaluation model, because if we really want the reviewer and the author to have a good interaction and a lot of iterations, then it is impossible to do that in 3 months. But I think that it's important to have not a monopole of electronic open access journals. So I'm very happy to learn about that.
Okay, thanks, Delia. So something that, so on the OWL's webpage, we've got some further reading associated with this event. There's an interesting article there by Boaz Barak from the University of Harvard. He suggests that in fact the program committee model of reviewing is extremely efficient. We're all familiar with journal submissions, and you send your submission off, and a year later maybe you remind the handling editor, the editor reminds the reviewer. Maybe 2 years back, you get your review back, and then the apocryphal story is that the review says, well, this would have been interesting 2 years ago, and now everybody knows it. Brendan or Benjamin, do you think maybe we can be more creative in the way that we view conferences, journals? Isn't it anachronistic, even seeing them as separate things? Mm-hmm. Revolution rather than evolution. Right.
Yeah, I do. I want to say, Thomas, do you mind copying that URL into the chat that you flagged up earlier? I didn't quite catch.
The chat is disabled, but the...
Okay, he can't. Okay.
It's a3nm.net.
Okay.
a3nm.net.
A3nm.
Oh, I can probably say.
Anyway,
but it's not mine, right? It's Antoine's, Antoine Amarilli.
But I have seen that web page. It's very interesting.
With Jamie's help, a couple of years ago, we set up the Open Access Journal interdisciplinary between math and computer science called compositionality. It's focused on sort of applications of category theory, but that idea more broadly. And so I agree. Well, three things we thought about when setting this up are very salient to the discussion. Two have come up in all the responses so far, which is creating archival quality of work and dissemination of work. And I think this discussion about conferences and journals and their relative sort of, and juxtaposing them, is about the fact that they play different roles in this process of sort of creating quality work and archive and disseminating it. And so the balance between that, I think, has been well spoken to. But the third point is recognizing merit. And this, I think, is really what drives the politics of say, why computer science is a conference first field, whereas mathematics is a journal first field. And if we are to, it seems to me a lot of the imbalance comes from the way that we recognize merit in our fields. And so to address why, say, conferences may not be serving that purpose in their design, I think we should really look there. How are we figuring out what is good work, and how are we ultimately giving people jobs, giving people promotions, giving people prizes?
Okay, thanks, Benjamin. We haven't heard from you on this topic. You don't have to say anything, but I want to give you the opportunity.
I don't think I have anything to add. People have spoken wisely.
Okay. Okay, well, in that case, I think we can move on to our next question, which is from Bob Cooker from the University of Oxford.
Okay. Am I unmuted? Yeah?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello. So I'm Bob from Oxford. I've organized well over 50 conferences myself. I'm also in the steering committee of QPL and ACT, which has already been mentioned, and involved in the journal with Brendan too. And I don't understand how CS conferences can be so outrageously expensive, and also as compared to maths and physics conferences. I'm also active in maths and physics and other things, and just ridiculous the prices you have to pay for a CS conference. This makes them elitist, and given the importance of conferences to the careers, this makes the field elitist as well. This is deeply wrong, and I think this is even more wrong than the publication private houses we all swear about, because these conferences are in our own hands. And so we are responsible for this elitism. So why is it like this? Why is it like that? Sometimes you hear that the professional bodies have something to do with. So why do we keep these professional bodies around if they make the field elitist? Okay, that's my question.
Okay, thanks, Bob. Thomas, maybe we could come to you. You're president of the European Association of Computer Science Logic. Do professional bodies in computer science, like ACM, there were others, do they have an incentive to keep costs down of the conferences they organize? They take a cut after all. I mean, this is maybe difficult questions I'm asking, but it'd be interesting to discuss.
Well, I think if you organize a conference on your own, a small conference maybe, then you can keep it cheap. I mean, it will be a lot of fun. It will be a lot of sleepless nights, and it will be cheap. But if the conference is large, then probably you have to hire a company. You need professionals, and that costs money. I mean, I'm not aware of conferences, say in Europe, where the money doesn't go into the conference. I mean, the money that the participants pay. So, I mean, you were asking about CSL. I mean, if we plan a CSL, then we make a budget, and that the budget is supposed to cover the costs and nothing else. And yeah, I don't know.
Moshe, maybe we could go to you. Computer science conferences are too expensive.
Yeah, well, you know, I remember reading some time ago an article, How to Live in Your Car. So somebody actually wrote, you don't need an apartment. You can live in your car. I guess it depends on the climate. It has to be not too hot and not too cold, but you can live in your car. So partly is, you know, we can blame the association, but many computer science conferences don't necessarily go to association. Even the association, you know, even if you add to the price 50%, 1.5, I don't think that's what they make the course so expensive. But we like them to have them in a nice hotel, and you have to pay, either you bring enough people to the hotel or you have to pay for the space. Some universities charge for the space. We ran Flock at Oxford. It was a fantastic venue, but Oxford makes a lot of money about renting space, so space was expensive. We had to get AV services. People likes to have nice coffee breaks, and then I want to have a nice, someplace you can say, go outside and have lunch. Not everywhere, not every place you can say, you can launch 500 people on the town and say, go have lunch on your own. People like to have a nice dinner. I mean, by the end of the day, blaming the association to me is a red herring. That's 15% that we don't like, but it's only 15%. We like to have invited speaker, invited speaker expect to be paid. So you add that, it's just one cost after the other. There's no usually, you look at the budget, say, why is it so high? And you think you can find one item you can strike and you get to a good budget. And the answer is no, it's an accumulation. You die by 1,000 cuts.
Who else would like to comment on this?
I mean, Bob, are you volunteering to be the next treasurer for Flock? You can be and help us do the budget and see. I mean, we all try to push the cost down as much as we can, but there are certain expectations even of the community. What will be services will be provided as part of the conference?
I mean, can I say something?
Yes, please do.
Okay. So, yeah, for example, I organized the first ACT conference with zero budget. So Brandon knows this, we had 150 people. So it's a big conference. We didn't do all the fancy stuff, but we had sponsorship specifically for childcare for female participants. And it was the only income we had, the only. And there was no fee. Did you have a fee, Brandon? I can't remember. Maybe
I think it was 30 pounds or something.
30 pounds or something.
Did you have invited speakers?
Well, no, we picked the invited speakers from the contributions. We did a couple of tricks to make the conference more inclusive. So it's all about inclusivity, creating more inclusivity.
But my point is there is no outside forces that make the conference expensive. The reason they are expensive is because what we expect to see in a conference, yes. And you have decided that low cost is your primary value. And therefore, you're not going to invite people from far away that will travel. And maybe again, virtual conference will change the cost structure. But the point is, if we want to find, you want to make the world better, look at the mirror. As there is a song, I think Michael Jackson song, look at the man in the mirror and change the man in the mirror. The reason conferences are expensive, because what we expect them make the conference expensive, in my opinion.
So, but that's an essential part of my question. Isn't that a problem? Because of the importance of conferences to the careers and having conference papers, this makes it for many people completely impossible to go to the conferences, get papers, and get a career.
We should think particularly of researchers in developing countries, for example, yes. Right?
So to me, this question, that's the crux of this question. It's about inclusivity for early career researchers and for people from less sort of prestigious or well-financed institutions. And I think that's where a compromise can be made. And I think what I'm hearing is really just a call for maybe there are costs to be recruited, but who is bearing those costs, and is that fair? And so I just want to put in a plug for basically low confidence for early career participants.
So in the Types Forum mailing list, there's been an interesting recent discussion on the topic. Should online conferences be free? Benjamin, I wonder if you have an opinion on that.
Online conferences should not be free. Conferences cost something. Online conferences can be vastly less expensive than physical conferences. And the fee structure for online conferences, just like physical conferences, should be organized so that the people with more means bear more of the cost. And that's not too hard to do. But they should cost something. They should cost, participants should be charged on average what the conference, what it takes to put the conference on. And by the way, to support the professional organizations that in some cases organize the conferences year after year. I think a reasonable contribution to keeping groups like ACM and IEEE and whatever other going is fine. One could ask those organizations sometimes to tighten their belts a little bit. But the principle of giving money to organizations like that help the field seems fine to me. But I think virtual conferences should be much cheaper than physical conferences, and they have been.
Okay, so with an eye on the clock, I want to move on, if it's okay, to our final question, which is from David Solpic from the University of Paris. Go ahead, David.
Hello, sorry, I don't have a video.
That's okay.
Do you hear me? Okay. So my question is about the tools we use for virtual conferences. There's a bunch of tools, open, free, and respectful of private data that seems to be not used by anyone. I'm thinking about Big Blue Button that could replace Zoom, or Mattermost that could replace Slack. What is the reason for that, if there is one?
Okay, so your concern is the fact that by using commercially operated virtual conferencing systems like Zoom, Microsoft Teams, I guess there are many others, we're somehow losing control. We're certainly losing control of some of our personal information, and we're overlooking open source, free, probably, certainly cheaper alternatives.
David, could you put this system on the chat so we will know what you're talking about?
Yes, I can add a link. Do you want to nonetheless give us your opinion while I'm doing that, Moshe?
You know, I don't think anybody is using Zoom because of the fees. I mean, people use Zoom because of the functionality, and if Big Blue Button can produce the same functionality, then people will use it. I mean, in fact, Zoom was a company nobody heard about it like 7 months ago, right? And they were able to edge out everyone else because they provided the functionality. I mean, Google had to work, is still working very hard, and Microsoft, they're all working very hard to compete with Zoom. I just yesterday zoomed up in the stock market. So I think at the end of the day, people want functionality, and if free tools will provide the same functionality, people will be happy with it. We have to remember that income translates to ability to hire people and build feature and add functionality. I mean, the problem with any tool which is free is what is the business model? How do you get the money to keep investing in the tool? The fact that Zoom is profitable, that's the engine of innovation, okay? I'd love not to have to pay for Zoom, but can a free model sustain an improving tool against tools that will keep improving?
Would another panel member like to give their comments?
Yes, I would like to comment that yes, BBB is a great tool, but it does not support very well a lot of video traffic. So that's a problem with BBB. As far as I know, it is well used in many, for example, in my university for the teaching courses, but you ask all the students to turn off the video. So, for example, I'm not sure that BBB is able to support a meeting like this one. And I would like also to add something to the question is that, yes, maybe there is a legitimate question between about why do we use Zoom, but there is another question which is important and interesting is that we use Easy Chair for the PC discussion in general, or maybe hot CRP, and we all seem to accept that. And this is, in some sense, we have the same kind of problem. We trust the system, but there is no control of the system coming from the community. So the problem is the data, how we store the data, how we make the data circulate, and we probably need some infrastructure which can be controlled by the community in a transparent way in order to be sure that we are using the good tools. But I think that this is not only related to Zoom or other tools, but also to systems used by PCs to discuss papers, for example.
So Nicholas Thierry in the audience, I know you're also interested in this. Do you want to just make a very brief comment, if you like? Nicholas, are you there? Okay, Nicholas might not be there. I want to spend only a little bit more time on this question. We've got some more exciting things lined up at the end of the debate. But Brendan, Benjamin, Thomas, do you have a perspective on the question of the tools we use? Some of them are very expensive. Do they use our personal data in the right way? Should we be supporting open source alternatives?
I can say just briefly, we should, of course, support open source alternatives. But I will say this about Zoom: it isn't just about features and functionality. It's about quality. The quality of video that Zoom can provide, and I think maybe even more importantly, the quality of audio that Zoom gives you is just at the moment way ahead of what anything else can do. So that's an uncomfortable fact, but it's where we are.
Personally, I agree.
In the future.
Personally, I agree, and that's why the OWLS system uses, for this conference system, with the seminar series, we use Zoom, and we pay them an awful lot of money for it, and I'd be very happy to use a cheaper alternative, but I've not found one with the same level of quality. Okay, so that's our final question from the floor, as it were, but we've got a little bit more planned for the end of the debate. So what I'd like to do now is launch some polls. I've got 3 quite simple polls. This will give everyone in the audience.
Jamie,
yes,
can I ask a question of my fellow panelists?
Of course you may.
So this is the question that have been really, as I mentioned before, is there is this famous cartoon, a show politician asking, you know, there is a big rally and the politician asks, who wants change? And everybody raised their hand. Everybody wants change. Everybody is unhappy with the status quo. And then the politician says, who wants to change? And everybody looks down glum. We all want change, but we don't want to change. And to me, this is the crux of the dilemma. Okay, if we want change, and I think there is a wide sense here that some change is necessary, how do we bring it about? I mean, partly, you know, for some reason, our professional associations are failing us in this one. And the reason is because their business model, it ties to the past. It ties to the processes of the past. And so they are scared of any discussion of changing business model. ACM finally in June made a resolution to go over 5 years to open access, which is, you have to understand, it's a colossal change. And they will have to work incredibly hard to make sure that they financially can survive it. And so I think at the end of the day, this is on us. How do we bring about change?
So this is launching us perfectly into the final phase of the debate. I'm extremely grateful for that, Moshe. First, I want to collect some little bit of information through these polls anonymously from the audience. I'm launching the polling. You should now be able to see the first poll. I will read it out. It's a 3-way choice. Until recently, it was common for members of the theoretical computer science community to make regular flights. If COVID-19 can be resolved soon with a widely available vaccine, in other words, if we can forget about COVID, if only, should we try as a community to, option 1, go back to our usual flight habits. For many of us, that's flying several times a year. Option 2, continue regular flights, but a substantially reduced frequency, you know, maybe half or a quarter of normal. Or option 3, almost completely eliminate flights. So flying maybe a few times in our career, only really for very special occasions, okay? Last chance. Okay, now you can all see the results. So this is very interesting. Can you all see that? Benjamin, what's your immediate thought on the community's response to that question?
My thought is, wow, a quarter of us want to almost completely eliminate flights.
Is that maybe higher than you thought? Lower than you might have hoped? I don't know.
No, higher.
What would you say to the 75% of us, 73% of us? I didn't vote, but I think I might well have voted for that option if I had remembered to vote. To those of us who chose the second option.
I feel your pain. I also want to keep going to conferences, and indeed, maybe there should have been something between option 2 and option 3, like once every couple of years or something like that.
Particularly. Okay, so I'm going to move on now to the next poll. There are only 3 of these. Okay, poll number 2. Most researchers in theoretical computer science follow the conference first model, which results are published first in a conference, later on in a journal expanded form. As a community, should we aim to, option 1, continue this into the future? These conferences could be physical or virtual, of course. This is a completely independent question to the physical or virtual conference question. Option 2, should we seek as a community to switch to a journal-first model, more like mathematics? Okay, Moshe, what's your guess as to the outcome? Just very quickly. You're muted, Moshe. I don't know if you're talking. You don't have to guess if you don't want to.
Yeah. No, it should be, there should be, I suspect, a huge, I would guess a majority would go for journals.
Two-thirds want to change. I'm very surprised.
That's very high. These are people saying not that they want to see change, but they're willing to change. The question is, how do we flip the switch?
We'll get there. We'll get there.
Yeah.
We'll get there.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, very high, very high.
So
More
now,
than 2/3, amazing.
So now the third poll. These are all anonymous, remember, no mumbo jumbo, private information being leaked. Okay, well, maybe to Zoom, not to me anyway. Right, question. For the purposes of professional networking and scholarly communication, I'm lumping multiple things together, of course, but there's flaws with all these polls. Virtual conferences can be, option one, just as effective as physical conference, or even more effective. You know, maybe once we work out the flaws, maybe they're not all that great now, but maybe in 2 or 3 years when we really know how to do virtual conferences really well. Option two, less effective, but still reasonably effective. Option three, much less effective than physical conferences. Okay, thank you very much. Here are the results. You should all be able to see them now. Brendan, what are your thoughts on those statistics?
I broadly agree with the question as framed. So to read them out, it's interesting that the half that say it's, well, 20% say they can be just as effective, and most people think they're less effective. But I think the question is not to compare them, but to think about the ways that they're differently effective. I think there are advantages to physical conferences and advantages to virtual conferences too, even for professional networking and scholarly communication.
So what's absolutely clear is that many people in the community remain to be convinced.
Right.
I think that's clear.
And maybe
we have to do a good job of that in the years to come.
Yes, Delia?
Yeah, maybe it's too early to answer to this question. Maybe we need still some other models of virtual conferences and social interaction in order to answer properly to this question. Maybe in 1 year, the answer will be different.
Of course. Okay, so now we're in the final phase of the debate. We'll look to go for roughly another 20 minutes. So we'll go till the end of the hour, and there will be some opportunities for people in the audience to contribute by raising your hand. And Moshe has framed it perfectly. We've discussed around many of the issues. We've all had similar conversations many times, going back decades for some of us. We're in really special time now. We have COVID. More pressingly, many of us would argue, we have climate change. How can we make sure that something changes in the way that we set up our professional business of computer science? We might disagree on what needs to change, but I think everybody here thinks there are at least some major things that need to change quite radically. Thomas, would you like to respond? So not necessarily what needs to be done, we've been there, but how can we make sure at least something is done? Thomas, maybe you're
yeah. I mean, so for the climate thing, so if you're involved in a conference, make the body of your conference commit to some reduction goal and contact us. So the idea behind this is not only to have this on the web page as a big list of conferences, but also to have a network of conferences so that ideas can be exchanged. I mean, I think Delia said it. People should experiment, should do different things at different conferences, and should exchange the outcomes. And to do this, somehow the conferences have to find together. And I'm extremely thankful, Jamie, you stopped me at that point in my introduction statement that you did this here as a step in that direction. I mean, the community has to come together to do these things. It's not only about who wants to do something, it's also to enable us to do something.
Who else would like to answer that question on the panel? How can we make sure at least something changes?
I can jump in briefly. My take on this is, again, I said at the beginning, we have a golden opportunity right now to make virtual conferences good. We're not going to have that opportunity twice. And so anybody who cares about reducing about changing physical conferences to make the impact less should be putting all of their spare energy and then some into making virtual conferences good.
So those of us with the most capacity to effect change are, of course, the steering committee chairs of our major conferences, which brings us to you, Delia.
Yeah, I think that it's our responsibility to all of us to promote and foster inclusive debates and discussions among the steering committees, the departments, the conferences, the business meetings of our conferences, in order to exchange about these topics and to make all of us take ownership of the problem. But of course, the steering committees of conferences have a lot of possibilities. But the issues and the different topics needs to be discussed and exchanged. I mean, it's not very easy to understand which is the good model. So at the end of FSCD and LEAKS and ICALP, we organize a discussion between the two steering committees and the two local organizing committees, and it was very interesting to exchange and to understand what was good and what was bad. I think that Thomas is right in saying that maybe we need to enlarge a little bit this spectrum and to talk between different conferences in order to learn from different experiences. And then we have also, we need to accept that things could be wrong at one point, but then could be improved later in the future.
So let's have a little thought experiment. Suppose that, you know, over the next 6 months, we have a COVID vaccine and it's widely available. Of course, maybe that's not very likely, but at some point, maybe that's not too unlikely. Will the big conferences, Fox, Stock, LIX, FSCD, CSL in our community, will they basically go back to business as usual, making it the responsibility of the participant to decide how they go or if they're going to change their mechanisms? Or do we expect that it's the duty, the moral responsibility, however you want to phrase it, of the steering committees of those conferences to affect change? Moshe?
So first of all, I think right now we're also starved of social contact, that we are going to rush to meet each other again. It's going to be very hard after this, after being, you know, basically, I'm a prisoner in my own home now for 6 months. It will be very hard to say, okay, now you're free, but please stay there. So, but I want to go back in December. In fact, it was kind of, some people blame me on this because I wrote about publish and perish, about the need to stop traveling, and poof, it happened. But I made what I thought was a very modest policy proposal, which I think every conference can accept, which is to let attendees decide if they want to attend in person or remote. Even if you have a paper, you are not forced to register fully. We need to figure out the financial aspect. Part of the issue is we should let people decide how much, what is the value for them of actually all the social value, the networking and everything. You have to weigh it against the financial cost, the time cost. There's a whole bunch of other costs. Suppose you let everyone decide, I'm going to attend physically or virtually. And that will be, I think, an enormously useful experiment to see, okay, how much it is important to people. And including, you know, if you invited speaker, the same issue. Suppose you allow them to decide they're going to give their talk virtually. And we are using now everything we have learned from this forced experiment to see how we create some networking around it. And so we don't have to have a model which is prescriptive, but instead if you start to let people choose, we'll kind of see where this goes. And I suspect that many people will say, I'm going to participate virtually.
So maybe I can ask Brendan to contribute. You're a postdoctoral researcher. Do you think postdoctoral researchers, if they're given the choice, they might think, well, you know, maybe I don't have that much grant money available or whatever, but feel pressured into attend, maybe I don't want to burn carbon, but feel pressured to do so under the knowledge that that professional networking and so on is so important to them in the earlier stage of their career and might just be operating better in person than virtually?
I certainly think so, and I've made that decision myself. So yes.
Moshe, I mean, what would you say to Brendan?
I didn't quite understand. Brendan, can you say it again?
So I've chosen to attend conferences because of, well, if given a choice, I would have attended virtually.
Because you fear that the social networking experience would be?
Right, but I mean, even beyond that, you have a paper in a top tier conference and you have to present it. Somebody has to go and present it for it to be accepted. You want that opportunity to have the paper in the conference, so you have to go.
You don't. No, my point is, suppose we tell you, you don't have to go. You can present remotely.
Yeah, I think that would be great.
So you're saying that you would feel if that compulsion to present physically was removed and you were given the option to present remotely, even if it was a great paper at a big conference, you would potentially accept that and present your paper remotely. And would you worry that perhaps that your professional development might suffer as a consequence?
Perhaps, but there are other things in life as well. And I mean, I'm not saying every conference or somebody in my position might make this decision, but certainly some. I think everyone should be grateful for that flexibility.
Okay, so I'd like to bring in a couple of contributions from the audience. I know that Antoine Amarilli is in the audience, and he indicated to me he'd be happy to give us some thoughts. Antoine is the author of this website, a3nm.net, which has been, URL's been circulated earlier. He's got lots of interesting thoughts on the structure of computer science as a community. Antoine, are you there? I wonder if you wanted to share some of your thoughts with us. Okay, potentially Antoine is not there. Paul Taylor has raised your hand. Paul Taylor, please go ahead briefly if you can, make your point or ask a question to the panel. Okay, I'm not sure if Paul Taylor
just to tick, I'm trying to start my video.
Okay, well, don't worry about that. We can hear you.
People have talked about conferences and journals in this, but there's another element in presentation of research that we have, and that's local seminars. Now, the effect of the lockdown is that there's no such local anymore. We live in the discrete metric. So something that was a little bit of a disappointment to me, I was hoping that people would advertise the Zoom addresses or whatever of their local seminars more, so that I could go to category theory seminars in Sydney or wherever else, Montreal or so on. And that happened to some extent in other subjects. There's this site called researchseminars.org, but we didn't seem to join in on that. Now, if our local seminars became global ones, then they would merge with a lot of the functions of conferences, and that would be it. You know, if we could do that, that would be an interesting evolution of the way that we present research.
It's a partly a security problem. We have, we don't have a good model of you open a Zoom link and then you get, and people have done it, people who had to teach had a problem with Zoom bombing. So it's a very nice idea. It's very hard to open it completely. My seminar is open, by the way, and you're welcome to join. Just write to me and I'll send you the link. But it's difficult to manage. It's a great idea. It's just a bit difficult to manage.
Our MIT Applied Category Theory seminar has a publicly open Zoom link, and we haven't had any problem. I'm not saying that nobody will have any problems, but we're grateful we haven't had any problems so far, and we have sort of between 20 and 100 attendees, maybe frequently every week.
Anyway, I'm happy to announce that I have a weekly seminar. Anybody who wants to join is welcome to write to me and join.
You might get a lot of emails. Okay, fantastic. Okay, so Antoine Amarilli is there, I think. Antoine, go ahead. What are your, would you like to ask the panel a question?
Yes, hello. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Great.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, I didn't have really a precise question in mind. I'm really grateful for the advertisement of this guy that had written to basically point out all the flaws I saw about our current way of operating, which goes beyond, I mean, the functioning of conferences and such. Maybe a question I could think of would be what would be the small changes that we can effect to improve the system? I think some of these changes are very small. The proposal of Moshe of allowing people to present remotely at conferences is a very small change that would be interesting to try out. For climate purposes and measuring the carbon footprint of conferences, a simple change would be to first measure that footprint, so asking people where they come from and how do they travel at conferences, so that we have an idea of the figures. Other things could be, for instance, so we had this initiative called No Free View, No Review, where we tried to work in favor of open access by encouraging people not to review for closed access journals. This is literally a negative action in the sense it's one less thing that we have to do. And I mean, already there it's difficult to get people to agree on change. So yeah, my question to the panel would be, what are the small things we can change and how do we get people to agree on even these small starting steps?
So very quickly, panel, small things, small, easy things, low-hanging fruits that maybe hasn't been mentioned.
Honestly, right now, I'm not interested in small things.
Fair enough. We need to make bigger changes.
Well, I think Moshe's proposal has the potential of being a big change, but it has been said before that hybrid conferences are the real challenge. I mean, to organize it so that the local participants and the remote participants profit from it.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's not a problem if 10% of the papers are presented remotely at the physical conference, but if 20% or 30% of the people are physically there and 70% are online, then it's not clear how you mix that.
Exactly, yes, that's a huge problem. But we are going there. We're going there, and we'll see what it's like.
I'd like to bring in Simon Gay, please. Simon, go ahead.
Hi, thanks. Okay, yes, I'm here if you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
So this is more of a comment. So I'm organising ICALP next year, and we've recently been, grappling with the steering committee over the question of, can we have a physical conference? Will we be forced to go online? And just thinking about it from the COVID point of view. And I'm very glad I joined this discussion, because I think previously my view was that, if we have to go online, this is now difficult. We have to organise a good online conference. We don't really know how to do that. And after listening to this debate, I'm now starting to think, well, actually, that's an exciting opportunity. And in fact, it also strikes me that this business of deciding to shift conferences online and how to do it, it's in the hands of a relatively small number of people, local organising chairs and steering committees and so on. And I think I'd like to appeal for some, general sharing of experiences and discussions among conference organisers about how to make things work. And I would love to talk to the organisers of recent successful virtual conferences to try to synthesise the ideas that have been tried at PLDI, ICFP, and so
on. Chad Bester, do you want to make your contribution?
May I just quickly respond to that?
Oh, I'm sorry. I just want to gather a few comments from the audience, and then we'll have time as a panel to come back. If that's all right, Benjamin?
As you like.
Chad, just briefly, please.
Sure. So I'm a very early career person. I don't even have a PhD, and I'm just at the point now where I'm able to start writing and submitting papers to things. For the reasons discussed today and others, I would like to submit my papers to journals and do that sort of publication. But I am reliably told by different people that this will be a career-limiting move. At the same time, I have yet to meet somebody who thinks that this is a just or sensible state of affairs, which suggests to me that as a community, we've lost control of something important in the publishing process. I'm wondering if you guys know what this is and have any suggestions about how we might get control of it back.
Thank you very much, Chad. So Benjamin, please feel free to make the point you were about to contribute.
Yes, just that there are channels for people to talk. So in particular, Simon, you may find useful, there is an ACM level task force report on virtual conferences with lots of information in it. It's a couple of months old, so you won't find very up-to-date information on specific platforms, but there's lots and lots of information about how to do the organization. Also, so if you Google ACM virtual conferences, you will get to a page that will take you to that report and also to a discussion forum for conference organizers that everyone is welcome to join and participate in.
Okay, so would any other panel members like to say something? This might be your final words. Delia, Moshe, Brendan, Thomas.
I would like maybe
now. So, how should we? Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Delia.
Yeah, but I wanted to say something which is not really related to the last question. So maybe I will say it later. It's okay.
It's okay.
Because I think that the debate will finish in some minutes, and I
well. So what will happen? Yeah. So in a couple of minutes, the debate will finish, and then those of us who want to stay around and chat will split into breakout rooms, and we'll chat until the cows come home or we go to sleep. Yeah. Right. But so, we need to bring the main event to a close.
Yeah. So since we are trying to imagine and we are trying to build a different model for the future, I would like also to talk a little bit about developing countries, because I think that there are really great talents in theoretical computer science in developing countries. And I feel that it's our responsibility to help them to develop recognized activities inside their countries. Otherwise, they will be forced to leave from their countries. I know about that. I think that we need to help them to play important roles in the organization of the international research activity, and not to relegate them to be just spectators. And coming back to the issue about costs, I think that it's crucial to keep low or completely remove costs for developing countries, but not only for virtual conferences, also for physical conferences, because I know a lot of cases of people that decide to not submit to some conference, even if they have amazing work, because they cannot pay the cost and the fees of these highly costly conferences.
Okay.
So I think that the balance that we are trying to build is also with respect to this topic.
Thank you, Delia. Would any of the other panel members like to say some final words? Because we should.
Yeah, I would like to.
Yes,
so
please.
We are actually now in the process of planning flock 22. The last flock was in 2018. It's a quadrennial event. So the next flock will be in the August of 22. Right now, the planning is if the world will go back to some kind of normal and there will be a vaccine, and it is planned for Haifa in Israel in August of 2022. We will decide, we have some time ahead of us, so we probably decide sometimes in the first quarter of 2021, whether a physical conference is still a realistic possibility, and if it's not, we'll have to figure out what to do. But even as it is, even if we decide to go with physical conference, I would love to hear ideas from people on how we start changing, how we not just say, okay, we just go back and we do flock exactly the way we did it before. How do we start taking advantage of the new technologies and the experimentation on one hand, and how do we start taking steps to reduce travel and carbon footprint on the other hand? So please, if you have ideas, I would welcome your input.
Thank you, Moshe. Other panel members, we would like to hear from you if you want to just make some concluding statements.
To Chad's comment, what we have lost control of, to me, it remains funding and jobs. And this is something broader than just the computer science community, and something that will take a lot of work to address. I would love to be involved in a discussion. I'm sort of involved in a new research institute trying to think about issues along these lines. But to Moshe's question more generally, sort of how do we begin? How do we change? I can at least say that as is clear now, we have a lot of experience within the community about starting various initiatives. So 68% of the people want a more journal-focused model. If the problem is high-quality open access journals with video abstracts that are archive overlay and free or whatever, come speak to me. We've started one, and I can share some experience and help with the text setup. An online seminar, I think these are incredibly important. These are quite straightforward to organize, really. It can be done. So change begins with individual actions, even though there are large structures that also need to be addressed.
Okay, Thomas, perhaps you want to make some final statements. Perhaps you already have.
Yeah, mainly I have.
Okay, all right. Well, I want to thank our fantastic panel, our fantastic audience. I wasn't sure how well this event would work. I think it's been good fun. I hope we can do another one sometime, and I hope at the very least that this has been an opportunity for people in the community to think about the details of all these issues, understand the blockages to change, and get talking to each other, and who knows what will come out of it. Anyway, thanks again to everybody for participating.
Thank you, Jamie. Thanks to Jamie.
Thanks to you,
Thank to Jamie for organizing it.
Yeah, thank you, Jamie.
Very kind of you.